Hello, and welcome back to Rejuvenated Women, Impeccable Health for High-Performing Women. This is episode 57. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swinson Ridley, and today I just want to share another Rejuvenate tip. And in this conversation, I want to revisit an episode that I did with Jen Malika, the Holistic Health Bots, where we talked about thyroid and, kind of all the other pieces that play into the thyroid piece of puzzle and piece of the pie. And why I wanted to go back to this was I actually, just sharing my own personal journey and story here, I actually just found out that I have what's called these days subclinical thyroid or functional thyroid. And what that means, I'm going to kind of run through the differences. Your traditional thyroid issue is generally an issue with TSH, which is impacting your pituitary and causing your thyroid to not produce enough thyroid stimulating hormone. And so that's traditionally like what we think of with a thyroid problem. But there can be a lot of other underlying issues. And what they're finding is, it's actually close to like 60% of hypothyroidism, which is 90% of the thyroid problems, are not being diagnosed because, and I was doing a bunch of reading this weekend because this subclinical hypothyroidism is like a real thing, and the way they test for it is really not helpful and not accurate. And just to kind of share how I've gotten to this point, I have, over the last 2 years, started putting on a lot of weight. I've put on probably 40 pounds. I've been tired. I haven't been able to exercise. I haven't really had hair loss or anything, but I've had a lot of the symptoms that are consistent with having hypothyroidism. And this is where this can be, you might be experiencing this because it can be really frustrating. It's like, well, what's wrong with me? Why is eating well not working? Why do I not have the energy to work out? Why am I getting sick all the time? Why do I keep putting on weight even though I'm doing all the things right? And this has been my experience. And so I finally, just got over myself and ordered the tests that I normally order with the women that I work with as it is, but really looked at it from a new perspective because in the research that I've been doing. And the thing is, all this stuff is out there, but a lot of your Western medical doctors aren't talking about it or haven't learned about it or don't want to bother to, learn something new or to discover that there's something underneath that could be causing problems. And it's not just simply about taking medication. So with subclinical or what's called functional hypothyroidism, all your numbers are normal. You have normal TSH, your T3, free T3 and free T4 are normal. What is off generally is what's happening outside the cell and the tissues of your body that aren't your pituitary. And this I found really interesting. I read this research paper this weekend that looked at this, but there's a difference between the tissues that surround your pituitary and the types of things that happen there and how T3 is taken up into the cell, which is part of what tells the body whether or not it needs more TSH or what, T3 or what's happening. And there's a difference between that and the rest of the tissues in your body. And so people can actually have hypothyroidism that's affecting your entire body, but all your labs are going to come up normal because it's not really testing what's happening at the intracellular level, so in between the cells, and how much of that T3 is actually getting taken up into the cell to be utilized to help things like your metabolism and all the thyroid does a lot of different things, but metabolism is the really big one. And so there's some really specific ways to test for that. One of them is to look at the ratio of free T3 to reverse T3, because if the body's having issues with this, it'll actually convert T4 into reverse T3, which is not usable. And so then you just have this floating around. And so that can actually be a much more accurate way than just testing TSH to figure out if you have hypothyroidism. What causes it? That's the other piece of this, because you can have all this stuff that's normal according to labs, right? But you're not feeling right and you don't feel well. And so if you just treat thyroid or assume like, okay, so do I just take some T3 now? Actually, no, you can end up hurting yourself more doing that. And this is the piece of the journey that I'm still figuring out for myself, but I wanted to come on and just share about this because I know I'm not the only woman out there who's struggling with these things. So if you just treat like T3 or take free T3, they can do thyroid supplementation that involves T3 rather than TSH. But if you do that and you aren't addressing heavy metals and stress are the two things that actually will cause this type of hypothyroidism, functional hypothyroidism. And what I found really interesting about the article that I read on this was that women, if we are struggling with obesity or you've done a lot of yo-yo diets where you've done a lot of restricting your calories, that actually increases your stress response and causes hypothyroidism on this level, in the intracellular level that we're talking about, this subclinical or functional hypothyroidism. And when that happens, your body puts the weight back on or can't lose it. And so I can't say that I've done yo-yo dieting, but I've been testing all the protocols and stuff that I do on myself. And a lot of the women that I work with have done the yo-yo dieting and just can't lose the weight. And it comes down to, we've created this environment where our bodies are hypothyroid but look like they're normal. And it's going to keep you from losing weight. Some of the other things that can be contributing to this are, if you have chronic illness like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, or if you have insulin resistance, which 60% of our population does, if you're dealing with diabetes or pre-diabetic, all of these things can impact how the thyroid, not your thyroid gland, but how the pieces of the thyroid that, the thyroid gland helps stimulate, T3 and T4, are getting taken up into the cells, and then that will start to impact your health and overall all well-being. So what do you do with this? You need to find somebody who, like me, knows the test to order, because it's also a question of like, do you have heavy metals you need to detox? We're exposed to all kinds of stuff, but is that part of the problem, or is it just a stress response and your sex hormones are off? Estrogen dominance is another thing that comes into play here, that if you don't address that and just address the thyroid, you're not going to get any, like, you're not going to actually be able to improve or notice a change. And this is why so many women on thyroid medication actually don't get relief, or nothing changes, or they're barely managing their symptoms but still not feeling great. It all has to come down to, there's more of the picture that we really need to look at. So if this is you, if you're someone who has been struggling with this stuff, maybe you're on thyroid medication, maybe you've just been being told that you're totally normal and fine, but you know something's wrong, you have to find somebody who's willing to connect the dots. That is me. I work with women from all over the world, whether it's me or somebody else. There are specific labs that we do to check your reverse T3 and your T3 ratio, and not just your TSH. We check your, stress response. You have to look at cortisol at least 4 times through the day to really get an idea of what's happening with your cortisol flow in your body, because there's a specific pattern and graph that it needs to follow. We need to look at, like I said, those heavy metals. We need to look at your sex hormones and your estrogen and progesterone and testosterone to see if there's something off there. And then it's about tweaking all of these things to help start to support the body to actually heal and function. Because here's the thing, you shouldn't need medications to deal with this. And this is, I'm going to be revamping my program as I work on all of this with myself, but it's like technically I know what to do, and there's some stuff that I just haven't been willing to let go of. I had a big stress reliever last week when I sold the big building that I own, but we have to be willing to start making some changes and giving our body the opportunity to heal through some of this stuff. And so that really comes from getting a really clear picture and understanding with testing. So if this is something that, is speaking to you, you're like, oh my gosh, do I have this thing too? Or I need someone who understands this on a much deeper level than just looking at my TSH, because the two things, as I said, your pituitary, which is what measures how much TSH your body needs to produce, and the rest of the body operate completely differently and have things firing differently. And so that's not an accurate measurement to really tell if you do have hypothyroidism. So if that is you, I would invite you to reach out to me. We can, just send me an email. We'll keep it simple. Dr. Alex at emergentwomenih.com. Shoot me an email. We'll set up a time to just talk through what next steps could look like with this. But, the first is really getting a clear picture of, okay, what's going on? What things do I need to address, and then making a plan from there. So send me an email, Dr. Alex at emergentwomenih.com. I'll put it in the show notes, and let's start this conversation, because the point is, you don't have to suffer. And the only reason I've been suffering as long as I have is because I've been too stubborn to actually order a dang lab test. So, take that first step and let me help start guiding you through what do you really need to take on and do to get to where you feel good again, and don't, have to be wondering, or don't have to go so far. Like, eventually you will develop what they might diagnose as clinical hypothyroidism, but all that really leaves you is trying to tweak medications. And that, that doesn't have to be a thing. We have the ability to get our bodies to reset and do this on its own. Hopefully this helps and serves you. Again, send me that email, Dr. Alex at emergentwomenih.com. Just put thyroid in the subject, or something like that, and we will talk to you with more tips next week.